This program is brought to you by the Center for a Sustainable Today. Our world is an amazing, complex living organism, and we coexist in a symbiotic relationship. With this great power comes a great responsibility, a responsibility to ensure the future by taking steps to be sustainable today. And now, here is the host of Sustainable Today.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us once again as we explore another topic related to sustainability. I'm Darcy Hitchcock.
And I'm Marcia Willard.
And today we have with us Dr. James Austin, who's with JFA Institute, and we're going to be talking about the prison system and his report called Unlocking America. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're looking forward to chatting with you, but first we'll do our news segment, find out what's been happening in the world around sustainability this month. I think what's been most on people's minds in the last month has been the economic meltdown around the world.
Oh, I haven't seen any news about that.
Me either. Well, one of the things I've discovered is this interesting sort of ripple effect, and what I've seen happen here in Portland, an interesting thing is around recycling. Portland has one of the highest recycling rates in the country, yay, but it's been thwarted in the last few weeks by the drop in the market for recyclables. And we've had...
So they have no place to send it.
Well, the price has dropped is
Right,
what's happened,
right.
and the market's drying up. So you're right, there are fewer buyers, but it's the fastest, biggest drop ever in prices. I was out touring a materials processing plant about a week ago, and the whole big plant was, one wall was lined with all these big bales of milk jugs sitting there waiting for some place to go, and they're hoping that the market picks up again, because if it doesn't, they all go to landfill.
Oh.
So, we think about recycling, how good it is to put your stuff in the bin, but it has to go someplace. There has to be a market for it.
Oh my gosh. Well, in terms of the prices of commodities, you know that oils comes down a lot. I've seen gasoline at under $2 a gallon. I sure didn't expect that. But at least it seems like people aren't expecting this to be a long-term trend. I was reading Road and Track, of all ridiculous things, thanks to my husband. But they had a really interesting spread here about oil and where it was headed, and it shows very clearly that non-OPEC oil has already peaked this year, and they have this other gorgeous chart here that shows that the spare capacity basically evaporates at about 2020.
Oh, that's only 11 years, really.
Really, and that doesn't give us very long to adapt. The other thing I thought that was really interesting about the article that I haven't seen before is they were talking about the relationship between fuels and water. And so gasoline, to produce gasoline, doesn't use that much water, but like 5 gallons of water for a gallon of gasoline. But corn-based ethanol uses 220 gallons, so 5 versus 220. Soybean diesel uses 900 gallons.
Because it's a thirstier plant and produces less oil, something like that?
I don't know all the details, but these algae, they're hoping that pond scum, basically algae, is going to save us, but that uses 50 gallons, so 10 times what gasoline is using. So there are all sorts of interesting issues about how we're going to solve our transportation problem, and there's no easy fix. We're going to have to make some tough choices.
Got that right. I was reading about the oil sands up in Canada, and they claim to have as much oil up there to really meet our U.S. needs for another 50 years or so, but there's a dirty little secret behind it, because when the process of extracting the oil from that shale and that sand leaves behind poisonous waste ponds. They're so big now they can see them from space.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so far. And also it takes a lot of natural gas to do it. So
And they have to chop down a lot of forests to get to it, right?
Yeah, so there's like no easy answer to this.
Oh, that's terrible. Well, on the positive side, just so that we all aren't completely depressed, there's been a lot of interest around electric cars, in part because we can use the excess capacity of our generation at night to recharge them. And so according to the Oregonian, Oregon's being primed to be a handful of sites around the country to pioneer these new electric cars that are scheduled for release by Nissan. And there's this cool picture here about an I-unit, which doesn't represent exactly what they're going to have. Hopefully, I don't want to drive that in the rain. But
looks like they bred a car with a Segway.
Right. But the cars that they are planning have a range of about 100 miles. So that's fabulous,
Yeah.
you know. And because the reason Oregon was chosen was because we have the highest per capita ownership of Priuses, and Portland General Electric is already setting up the infrastructure for people to plug in their cars.
I know, I want one.
I do too, but I think you're going to have to wait. They're hoping 2010.
I can make my car last that long.
You've made it last quite a long time.
Yes, I have. What's a couple more years after a few decades?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So anyway, let's get back into the topic at hand. Why don't you tell us, James, a little bit about the JFA Institute and how you got interested in the prison system problem in the first place?
Okay, well, the JFA Institute is an organization that I run. I'm the president of it. And basically, we are criminologists that are hired by state and local government and the federal government to study issues that are going on with respect to prisons, jails, and the use of those devices to try and reduce crime in our society.
And you're based in Washington, D.C., right?
Based in Washington,
D.C. So you flew all the way here
Yes,
just for the show, bless your heart.
Yeah, just
Thank
for you too, because I've heard so much about you.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. There go our ratings.
All right. I started, and this is kind of interesting because it kind of sets the tone for what I want to talk about. In 1970, I left college and I got a job working in the Illinois Department of Corrections, working at Stateville and Joliet Penitentiary, the home of the Blues Brothers, if you recall the movies. But back then in 1970, there were approximately 190,000 people in the entire United States who are in our nation's prison systems.
And what percentage of the population was that at that time?
That was a very small percent, and it's still actually a small percent, and I'll get to that, but it was less than 1%.
Okay.
Today, today we now have about 1.7 million people that are in just the state prison system.
10 times as much.
Exactly,
right?
10 times we've increased. This is the biggest experiment in any society of increasing the number of people to be incarcerated in the state prison. Now that's just the tip of the iceberg. Kind of hold on to your hats here. We also have what's called the jail system. The jail system is where you go when you're arrested and await trial, or you get sentenced to a sentence of less than 12 months. There's another 700,000 people that are in the jail system on any given day. So you put it all together, it's about 2.2 million people on any given day in the United States of America are incarcerated. And that represents about 4% of the nation's population. Now, it gets even more scary when you start talking about, well, who's in the prison and jail system? It's not a random distribution of our society. It is primarily males, primarily young males, and primarily Hispanic and black males. It's gotten to the point now, in terms of how we use our prison system, that if you're born a black male in America today, 1 out of 3 will go to state prison before they die.
One out of 3.
1 out of 3. That's the statistical estimate by the Department of Justice.
That's criminal. Sorry.
Stop. What's the relationship? And I don't want to take the spotlight away from what's clearly a racially charged issue, but what's the correlation between prison population and socioeconomic status? And does it have as much or more to do with that than it does with race or culture? Or
Good point. It has much more to do with socioeconomic status, because again, if you look at who's incarcerated, it is predominantly people who are not well educated, don't have a history of employment, are having problems in terms of their ability to assimilate within our society. But there is still this racial issue, and we can't forget it, because if you look at the decision points in our criminal justice system, which is the decision to get by police to arrest someone, and then conviction, and then being sentenced, what you see is a big jump from arrest to conviction. You have a much higher proportion of that pool of people that are being arrested being convicted who are African American and Hispanic. And that raises some issues about affordability of counsel at the time that you have been arrested and charged with an offense. But it's a good point. You know, ultimately, we're talking about a system that is being used to warehouse people that come from our lower socioeconomic system.
Right, as opposed to giving them jobs or.
Well, yeah, and it's, I mean, the thing about crime, and people don't understand this as well as they should, it's basically a phenomenon that is disproportionately involves young males. And age 15 to 25, 26, those are the what we call the at-risk years. That's the group that is going most likely to get in trouble, you know, because they're having some problems in their life. But as they get older, they stop doing that. So there's what we call a maturation effect. Now, the ironic thing about our prison system is that they're mostly filled up with males that are above that age group. In other words, they've progressed and they've gotten what I call long-term contracts, you know, because of what's happened to them as youth. But we're really misusing that money because they are not the person that you should be afraid of in terms of being a victim of a crime. It's the next generation of males that needs to be raised properly, given a better opportunity, better education. If you start doing that, then we don't need the prison system at the level we need it now.
So let me test this theory on you, based on what you just said, is that you have someone who commits a crime for the first time, and it's a first-time offense, so they get, maybe they don't go to prison. They commit another crime, maybe don't go to prison. By the time they get to that 3 strikes thing that we're seeing in many states, that's when the prison sentence kicks in, but by that time they're in that maturation stage. So are we doing it backwards?
No, you're not doing it backwards because we really couldn't afford to incarcerate every young male who got arrested. We have about 12 million arrests a year in the United States. So if we were to try to incarcerate everyone, and there's no need to do that because a lot of these crimes, although they're troublesome, they're not things we like to see, they are not going to be proportional to the harm that's being inflicted. I've been a victim of a crime several times in my life. I'll say it's always the same person, and that's always a young male who's either trying to break into my house or tried to assault me or something like that. So we have to be thinking, I guess, more proactive about this. It is interesting that if you look at states that have low incarceration rates, and I will say Oregon has one of the lower incarceration rates, even though it's increased dramatically, it's in that core of states that's below what the national average is. It also has a low crime rate. So it's like, you know, a relationship
so locking
there.
people up doesn't necessarily, what's the cause and effect relationship between those two things?
None.
Is it, okay.
There's no relationship at all. I live in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has the highest incarceration rate in the world. We incarcerate huge numbers of our population. We also have one of the highest crime rates. I mean, if we thought imprisonment was going to solve our problem, Washington, D.C. would be completely safe. There'd be hardly any crime going on there at all. But that's not the case.
Well, maybe that argues for the reverse correlation about the more that prisons are not only not the solution, that they create criminals, they breed criminals.
There's a criminogenic effect. There's also an interesting study that was done about 10 years ago where they looked at all the states and they're trying to explain why certain states had high levels of violent crime and suicides. And one of the predictors was the incarceration rate. Because what that incarceration rate is doing, it is taking large numbers of young males out of the community and putting them in prison, kicking them back, and it's like a churning effect, and it's destabilizing those communities.
Well, let's we only have about a minute or so before we go to another segment of our show. So tell us what are some of the impacts. Obviously, this is costing us a fortune, and there are social justice issues, but there are other sustainability-related issues related to having so many people in prison, right?
Well, let's talk about the cost real briefly. The entire criminal justice system costs you and I $200 billion a year. The prison system is in the neighborhood of $40 to $50 billion a year.
Wow.
So this is lots of money that's being put. Now, that money, from what we write about in the Unlocking America report, is the need to take that money and reinvest it in our communities, in employment, industries, small businesses that nurture those communities and bring them back to life.
It sure seems like it would be cheaper to keep them out in the community and help them be productive than to lock them up, because it costs a fortune per person, right?
Correct. And the good news is that there are ways to do this, and there are ways that states are now starting to move. The economic crisis that you talked about is going to be a window of opportunity for us not only to look at things about our ecology, our use of energy, but also our use of punishment. And so I'm hopeful that things will turn around in the next 5 to 10 years.
That's great. Well, I certainly hope so. Well, you're talking about that there are things that can be done, and I think we've got a great example in our next spotlight. Juvenile offenders make up a significant portion of people who are put into prison. Provided that they're not adults and not tried as adults, they often end up in youth facilities. These institutions try to correct the behavior to prevent them from causing more crimes or getting rearrested. Animals have commonly played a role in this purpose, but here in Oregon there's a program that's really unique. Project Pooch is run by a private nonprofit organization that matches shelter dogs with the inmates to correct the behavior of both of them. Mercedes Rose paid a visit to Project Pooch to see why this program has been so phenomenally successful.
Never had a friend like this. Unconditional sloppy kiss. Got no problems that can't be lit. How can anybody resist? He's my buddy. Yes, I love that dog.
Hi, we're here today with Joan Dalton. She is the director and the founder of an amazing program called Project Pooch. We're at McLaren Youth Correctional Facilities in Woodburn, Oregon, and Joan is going to tell us all about this amazing program and what it does both for the youth as well as for the dogs. So Joan, tell me about Project Pooch.
Well, Project Pooch started 15 years ago, and it was an experiment because it was the very first program working with dogs in a correctional site with juveniles. We get dogs from shelters and we match those troublesome dogs with troublesome youth, and they work out their issues, and the youth go back to the community as good citizens and good workers, and the dogs go to permanent loving homes.
Now let's clarify, Project Pooch, how are you connected to McLaren?
Well, we're a nonprofit located on site at McLaren. So we pay for the vet bills, the dog food, any materials we need for the kennel, uniforms for the youth, and the youth authority pays for one staff to supervise the youth.
How many boys do you have involved in the program currently?
We have 14, and that's the max we can have with only one staff. But when you have 14 youth and 14 dogs, you have your hands full for the day.
Leave it, come here, Hill. Zoe. Zoe, Hill. Right here.
Most of the dogs that come to us at least are, some of them have issues on one kind or another, and the guys have to be creative in how they work with those dogs and their problem solving skills, how they go about working with those dogs. And then they get to see the success in what they've done, make a dog that would otherwise probably be euthanized, be a family dog.
Leave it. Zoe.
A lot of the guys do have problems of their own.
You can't get in if you just arrived at McLaren. McLaren has other treatment groups such as violent offender, anger management, drug and alcohol, and youth have to be taking those treatment programs and be progressing before they can even apply to get into Project Pooch. We let the youth who are in Project Pooch be on the interview team.
They ask you a series of questions. It's kind of intimidating at first.
What kind of questions did they ask you at panel?
Questions they would ask you would be like, what's your experience with dogs? Why do you want to be a part of Project Pooch? Why should we hire you at Project Pooch? There'd be like if questions like if if one of our supervisors asked you to do something, you know, what would you say to them?
A lot of them had problems with authority figures when they first come in, and so they have to listen to all of us, and if they don't agree with us, they have to learn how to resolve the conflict. And many of them have learned to do that very successfully. Or if they want to ask for something, sometimes they will ask Adam Bergen, ask Miss Dalton if we can get certain software for our computer. And he will tell them, no, you have to learn to go ask her. Don't ask me to ask her. And I think also working as a team, some of them are loners when they first come in, and they learn, hey, it's a team. You might have to walk someone else's dog today. You may have to care for someone's dog who just came in from a neuter or a spay and needs special attention.
It teaches a lot of them, you know, what they need to do. It makes them more mature and think things through. So, I mean, this job is a privilege on campus. It makes them stay out of trouble on their units, you know, if they go to school, because there's some that are just part-time that only come when there's no school. It teaches them that they need to do good in school too, to be able to stay down here, because everything you do out there also reflects on how you're going to be able to, if you're going to be able to be down here or not.
It's basically just maintaining yourself and showing that you're an out of the ordinary person.
The guys are in charge of these dogs, everything about these dogs. They're in charge of keeping folders and paperwork and teaching them.
I actually had heard that you have to do more than just take care of the dogs when you're part of this program.
We got to keep their folders up to date, vaccinations and deworming, and
You don't actually have to do the deworming.
we have to give them medication for it. We have to administer the medication and clean up after it's done. But yeah.
And then you actually clean out the kennels? For
Yeah,
your
every
dog?
day.
Every day.
Every day. We cut their nails, clean their ears. Depending on what kind of dog you have, you got to cut their hair, you got to give them baths.
So you actually might have to groom your dog.
Yeah, brush their teeth. We do groom our dogs. As soon as they come in, we give them a full check over, and then we groom them.
Pretty clean.
If they come in, they're not spayed or neutered. Sometimes we got to take out sutures or keep wounds clean, wrap them, keep them up to date, make sure that they're not chewing on them and causing more infection and more problems. And then I'm one of the head trainers, so I gotta keep track of everybody else's training and make sure that they're staying focused on learning new stuff and new techniques. Go ahead and have them show me signals. So the signals are sit, down, stay, and then when you want them to heel, you just tell them to come over.
They come to work and they sign in and they sign out, and they are paid a portion of the adoption fee for the dogs that they train. So these dogs have to be trained and have to pass a test.
Canine good citizen, it's sit, down, stay, reaction to another dog, reaction to a sound. It's just basic doggy manners.
They get to stay as long as they want, as long as they do what they're supposed to do and are bumping up their skill level. So we have one that's been here almost 3 years. We have some less than a year. It helps us the longer they stay, because then we don't have to retrain, because it's a lot to learn. We're learning every single day something new. They can take Pet Care Technician 1 and 2. Those are correspondence courses out of Colorado. So we try to give them as many certificates as possible to help them when they leave here.
I'm hoping to go to college to be a vet tech and then possibly move on from there, but right now that's what's in my sights, is the vet tech.
On my resume, I could put down that I have this much kennel experience, and then they'll look at that and be like, oh, well, he's experienced, he knows what he's doing, you know, that he'd be a good asset to our company.
I think the correction system views this program as very positive. They see youth having good turnaround here. You know, that the youth, some youth will learn social skills down here that they didn't have. That if they didn't take that out into the public with them when they get out, they would have a hard time getting jobs, things like that.
This is a hugely successful program that people are emulating and wanting to figure out how to do in their own states, their own correctional facilities. How did you come up with the idea of Project Pooch?
Well, I knew prisons were doing dog programs, but they didn't actually have a kennel. Some would maybe bring dogs in, or birds, or some prisons had a couple of cats, and they found that it really calmed the prisoners, and they were getting a lot of really good results. And so I got some consultants who had successful programs to actually come to McLaren and look at the site and make recommendations. And the adult prison here in Oregon, a prisoner there wanted us to start a dog program at the adult. And I said, no, I love this age. I mean, there's no age group I would rather work with. They're trying to be independent, but they're still dependent. They're still trying to develop their social skills. They're open to learning new things. They love it when we bring in speakers, and they're humorous as well.
I like watching them learn too, because they come in here and they're frustrated and they can't handle it, and then, you know, they're kind of embarrassed to be with their dog, like, hey, come here, boy. They're like, hey, come here. You know what I mean? I'm like, talk to them, get excited. They're like, oh, I don't know. You know what I mean? They get a little embarrassed.
So
and
you watch them grow as
yeah,
well.
yeah. You come down here and the dogs, they teach you stuff, and you got to have patience, and they don't care how mad you are. They're still going to play. They're here to have fun. They're excited every day, and you come in mad, like, oh, get away from me, and they're like, I don't care. None of that matters to them.
They do not care. That unconditional love.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about the program?
It's fun to see when they finally get it, when you've worked at it, and you're frustrated, and you don't want to do it anymore, and then all of a sudden you're just standing there, and it's almost like they know that, so they just do it. Like, they know that they push you to the limit, like they're doing it on purpose, and then you're like, man, why don't you just get it, and then they just do it.
You do see emotional changes in guys, whether they'd like to show it or not. You know, when dogs get adopted, you know that certain guys, you know, when it's their special dog, when, you know, there's always the dog that comes through that the guys really love, and they really make a good bond with. And when you see that breaking of that bond, there is a little bit of hurt in them. You can see it. You know, a lot of the guys won't fess up to it, but you can tell that it bothers them.
At first, it was hard to kind of let go of my dogs, but now it's just I kind of gotten used to it, to where, like, you know, I'm working with the dogs, I'm helping out the dogs, and I'm just working with something greater than myself now.
I think I do feel a little bit better about myself, you know. It just lets me know that I'm doing better, because if I think about how I was doing, say, 10 months ago, before I came into the program, I was a little bit worse than I am now. I mean, I think it's just helped me grow, mature, and be, you know, just up there.
What we try to do is make sure that whenever a dog leaves, we tell the treatment manager he may be feeling down this evening because his dog left today. But then the joyous part is they know that they found a good home for this dog that may have been euthanized, because we're taking dogs, you know, that jump up and bark, and people have kind of given up on them. And so the people who adopt these dogs come back and they say, oh, this is the best dog. You did the greatest job training. And then they feel so good that they gave back to their community. And many of them realize that this is a way, that they've done something, that they've had to come here and they have to pay a price for what they did. But this is a way to start giving back, and it opens their hearts. A student said once, some of us have never received the love that we needed or wanted, but these dogs give it to us.
Joan Dalton, the director, has helped set up programs, I believe, in Japan. They have one they're working on in Eastern Oregon, some other OYA facilities. And Project Pooch has done it's a program called Pooch 101, which is an opportunity for people to come in for a week and learn what the program's all about. The behind the scenes of the nonprofit side of Project Pooch, as well as how to run a kennel, how to pick out dogs, things like that. And it's proven, you know, the 15 years, Project Pooch has found out what works. They did a research on it, and 0 out of the 100 youth that they checked in on had gone back into a correctional facility or committed a crime.
Joan, thank you so much for letting us come see your facility today. We really appreciate it.
We enjoyed having you here, and if you know of anyone looking for good trained dog, this is the place.
So you heard it right here. If you're looking for a great dog, this is Camille. She's ready for adoption. We also have a ton of other dogs inside that are all ready to go home with you. This is Mercedes Rose, bringing you the tools to become sustainable today.
Some call me a dog, leader of the pack. Some call me a hound, oh, that's a natural fact. When I'm on the prowl, I really strut my stuff, calling all night owls. If you think you're rough enough, who to talk about? Talk about town.
What what a great project that is. I mean, it's got to make such a difference to have puppies in the in the prisons. So back to you, James. So we've raised the issue that we have way too many people in prison, and it's costing us a fortune and having lots of problems. So what are your recommendations for how to turn this around?
Well, there's several things we have to do. First, I just want to set the stage by letting people know that these people that go to prison don't stay there forever. Each year, we send about 700,000 people to the state prison system. Another 11 million go to the state jail system, or the county jail system. So huge volumes of people are going in, but they're also coming out.
Yeah.
So here in Oregon, for example, you have thousands of people coming out of your state prison system. So we have to think about this as a potential asset to our economy. If we can get them to become productive citizens, it's just going to add to what we can achieve. So one of the things we have to do is better prepare them while they're incarcerated, so when they come out, the recidivism rate is reduced, but more importantly, they can get work and become productive citizens. So what we're trying to do in these prison systems is provide vocational training, education, so they can learn how to read and write and become skilled in some kind of vocation. There's also cognitive kinds of things that we're doing in terms of redirecting their thinking patterns and things like that.
Is that like anger management? Would that be one of the...
Yes, anger management, but also, you know, everyone kind of reaches these situations in your life where you can either go to the left or to the right. And they went to the left, so they need to go to the right. You know, not politically, but you know, I know I'm in Oregon. So but that's one thing. But the other thing, so rehabilitation, treatment, and bring these people up to speed so they can become productive citizens is important. But we also have to reduce the punishments that we're handing out, because these punishments can actually break them down to such a level they just can't recover. So what we recommend is two things. One is, let's look at how long they're staying in prison. One of the beauties of human behavior or of the prison system is that it doesn't matter how long they stay in prison in terms of their recidivism rate. So we can shorten the length of stay and get the same effect on the punishment side. So we recommend a modest reduction in how long they're staying. On the front end, people that may not need to go to prison, divert them into community-based programs which can handle them and keep them out of the prison system completely.
Yeah, it makes me crazy when somebody is thrown into prison for something and you think, you know, they do so much more good if you just made them go do something in the community. Why lock them up for that? It's not like they're a danger to the society.
Right, and we have a lot of people coming in for drug possession. We have people that it even looks like a violent crime, but when you look at it, it's not that violent. And so, and even there's a lot of programs where the victim and the offender get together and reach an agreement. You know, I mean, if I got victimized, do I want the person to go to prison for 2 years, which is going to cost us about $50,000, or do you want this person to repay the damages that they have caused you and get involved in productive activities? And I think most of us would say, give me my money back and let's get this person back on the right path.
Absolutely.
You know, you mentioned the experience of being in jail. I actually worked in a jail many years ago when I was fresh and young.
Right.
And what I was the teacher in the jail, and what I noticed of the staff, and I knew these people, the staff that worked there, nice people, intelligent people, but the atmosphere and the culture was really very demeaning. In fact, meal times, they were not called meals, they were called feedings.
Ew.
You know, it's subtle stuff like that
like farm animals.
And that's the way they were treated. They were treated like, you know, good. They were treated like prime farm animals.
Right.
Nicely treated, but like animals.
I kind of give the example to people who aren't in the prison system. If you want to feel a little bit like what it feels like to be booked into a jail or prison, go to the airport and go through the TSA screening process when they start yelling at you, take your shoes off, you know, get your card. It's kind of like, it's a demeaning, we call it demeaning exercise. And there is research that shows that if you take people, instead of sending them to prison, send them into a well-structured community-based program, their recidivism rate is significantly lower than if they had gone to the prison system, and it's much cheaper. So we just need to rethink and get much more creative about what we do, you know, with people that start experiencing, criminal tendencies. And I think, again, there's a lot of opportunities out there for us.
I'm sure you know of some specific programs that are really showing great results. Do you have any cool ones that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I don't have, because I can't advertise certain programs, but I can tell you there's a great program down in California called Delancey Street.
In San Francisco.
In San Francisco, but
and
now
what's
it's
special about that?
Well, what's special about that, the program is a completely non-for-profit entity. You will see no one there but ex-prisoners. They run businesses that support them financially. They take no money from anyone. So they run a restaurant, they have a building construction company. They do a variety of services that they're paid for because they're skilled at this, and they self-support themselves and have extremely low recidivism rates. So that's an example of how you can turn that workforce into a very productive, sustainable workforce.
You're talking about sustainability, so if I can hook this in addition to the social aspects, I understand a lot of prisons are sort of marrying the social improvement of convicts with environmental issues. So.
Yes, one of the new developments that's happened in several states is most prisons have this very large acreage that surrounds them because they're in remote areas.
Right, and no trees.
And no trees.
Nothing to hide
so
behind.
what do we have? We have sun.
Yeah.
And so what they're starting to do is with the training of the inmates, they're installing these huge solar farms.
Yeah, perfect.
So instead of inmates out in the farms, trying to raise vegetables, they're going to start raising energy. And those solar fields will be connected to the grid, so that energy goes back to the grid and supports all of us in terms of lowering the energy costs. And at the same time, the inmates that participate in this learn the skills of green technology.
Which is the future.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's very doable. It's surprising. You'll see a lot of these inmates are very skilled at certain kinds of vocational training. They already had that technology, and other ones can learn it pretty quickly in 6-9 months. So it's a win-win for everyone.
I know in Oregon they've also working on solar thermal because they use a lot of hot water in a prison to wash all the bedding and so on and so forth. So they're generating a lot of hot water and saving a lot of cost that way as well. So how do we keep people out of prison in the first place? Are there any programs that you've found are really successful to preventing all of this?
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of talk to a macro level kind of idea, but we have found in several states that if you pay the counties to keep these people in their local communities, they will do that. So these are called subsidy programs, where they'll look at a county and say, look, let's say it's Marion County, you have sent us 500 people to prison each year. If you reduce that, down to 400, we'll give you the money that we would have paid state government to incarcerate them, or some portion of that. And where this has happened, you see the prison admission numbers falling rather substantially.
Sure.
So that's one model.
So it keeps them in their own communities.
Yeah, it keeps them in the community, keeps them in contact with their family. It's less expensive. The counties actually, profit somewhat because they get resources. And this is the key. Again, all those inmates that come in are coming out, and most of them are coming out in a year or two. So the question, what have we solved by taking them out, warehousing them, and then just dumping them back into our communities? This is a much more proactive approach. And again, where they have tried this, they've been pretty successful in the counties taking that money and keeping the offender. There's another thing I have to mention, which is it's not just the offender. And when I talked about the 1.6 million people in prison, they are the fathers and mothers of 10 to 12 million children.
Wow.
Well, you mentioned Delancey Street, which I've seen in my visits to San Francisco, but we have something similar up here, and it's our next spotlight. As you're describing, one of the extra problems that offenders face is once they're released, they face the discrimination in terms of housing and jobs, and it makes it doubly hard then to get back to a productive life and stay out of trouble. And as a result, a lot of ex-convicts try to hide the fact that they've been in prison so that they don't face that discrimination. Well, that's not so true with Dave Dahl, who is very proud of the fact that he's turned his life around. He is an ex-con, but he's turned his life around. And not only has he overcome the stigma of being an ex-con, but he uses it as a marketing tool to position his product. And he also uses his business, like Delancey Street, to help other ex-cons find work experience. So in our business spotlight today, we have Phil Jefferson, who takes us to meet the remarkable maker of Dave's Killer Bread, and that's Dave Dahl.
Hi, this is Phil Jefferson with Sustainable Today. I'm here with Dave Dahl of Dave's Killer Bread. Hi, Dave.
Hey, how you doing?
Go back to the beginning of your story. You were born into a baking family. You have a history, dealing with the prison system. And then through it all, you came out on top.
Yeah, growing up, basically, I was a super depressed kid. I really had a problem. I guess you would say I was clinically depressed, but I just thought life sucked because life was depressing, basically. And part of that was the family business thing that I grew up in, and not really feeling like baking was cool. I got to a certain point where I started, cocaine, and the real drug that I liked a lot was meth. They called it cranked in. I tried that stuff, and immediately I wasn't depressed anymore. So I went out and started doing burglaries, armed robberies. I mean, my conscience went out the window with my depression. I went to prison 4 times for varying charges, all drug related, total of 15 years. Every other time that I got out of prison, I kind of just wanted to get higher up on the criminal ladder. I wasn't trying to be a baker. This particular time, about halfway through my sentence, I started taking some meds for depression. I also got a chance to study computer-aided drafting. It was my first introduction to my mind and what it was capable of doing. And so from that point on, I started feeling like everything was cool, and I couldn't have a bad day because no matter what happened, I was on my way. I was happy. I didn't really feel like I was in prison anymore. No matter what happened, there was bad things that happened, but I was always upbeat. Before I got out, I intended to just be a drafter. I really wanted to, I loved it so much. Somehow, somewhere along the line, I just started maybe having dreams or something that maybe I wanted to be back in the bakery. Some of them were nightmares, but they were mostly dreams. About a year or so before I got out, I contacted my brother, talked to him about it, told him, hey, you know what? I could take these same principles that I've learned in drafting and apply them for the family business. When I got out of prison, I started testing, fixing the cookies that we were making. At that time, had trans fats in them. We took the trans fats out and I made them vegan. I took all the eggs out, no animal products in them, and that was when I kind of decided that I wanted to make my breads vegan also. I mean, I realized there wasn't any need for animal products in these breads. So I'm not vegan myself, by the way, but I do like the idea. So I started off with the idea of blues bread, named it blues bread before I created it. I created it around the name, and I just made the best loaf of bread I could possibly think of making, and coated it with blue cornmeal. And it was when I came out of the oven the first time, I go, that's blues bread. That's a beautiful thing. And then I tasted it, and it was on at that point. I knew it had something. And I named it, I created it around the name blues. Blues, the blues music, but I added blue cornmeal to it to give it that blue tint, and I think it's a beautiful loaf of bread. Just making things happen in the bakery, going from the ground up on that, kept me pretty much busy. I was working like 100 hours a week for the first 2 or 3 years. And I loved it, but I was killing myself too at the same time. Talk about sustainability, it wasn't sustainable. 3 years ago, we were making 100 loaves a week of Dave's Killer Bread. That was my thing, was Dave's Killer Bread. In order to be more efficient, we've made all these breads combined with the Nature Bake organic breads. Now I don't even know how many loaves of bread, 50,000 loaves of bread a week.
Give me your impression of the prison system in America. You saw it over a 10 or 15 year period. What you think is fundamentally wrong with it, and then how you had to change your attitude to compensate for that.
There's a lot of negativity in prison. It's reinforced negativity. You know, there's a lot of punishment. When I was there, for most of the time that I was there wasn't really a culture of getting these guys turned around. It's almost as if they don't believe there's any hope for you. What they would do is tend to take more and more stuff, programs that were possible that might work, and they take them away. The CAD/CAM opportunity that I got is no longer there. That bothers me because that changed my life. For a guy to change his life, he's got to have a reason. He's got to have something else to take the place of the happiness and pleasure he got from the other life. The rewards he was getting before, even though prison was the eventual outcome, he still had to deal with his mentality that he was going to get out and rise up and be all this when he got out. That's what you want to give people a chance to do, is change the world a little bit with good things. When you're contributing to something, you know, you're creating like I am, constantly creating, you're seeing people's faces light up when they taste your bread. The prison system needs programs to help guys learn something cool. I'm sure just about probably 90% of those guys in there, when they get out, if they had an opportunity to contribute to society and make money at it, I think most of them would do it and they'd be happy to do it.
A lot of us don't know what we're worth. A lot of us don't know, you know, the meaning of life, if you get what I'm saying. A lot of us don't understand our role. You know, like for instance, for me, I thought my role would be selling drugs all my life because of the environment I was in. That's what I was used to. And I really believe the only way that I got out of that was when I went to the penitentiary, you know, and so it was like a 360 turn for me.
Obviously, there's some programs available now. Some of those programs are very positive. Can you outline what some of those programs are?
There's Thinking for a Change, there's Pathfinders, and all of these are just cognitive classes to change the way that you think, to change the thinking process before you commit a crime. And for the most part, it helps, you know. I think that as far as the Department of Corrections can do, I think that they can add more of the cognitive programs to help more individuals. I believe that if a person has a drug history, a drug charge, I believe that penitentiary time won't help them. I believe that some type of treatment would help them. And as far as myself, I never was into the the drug crimes, high up on the drug list. I was always into carrying guns. You know, that was my thing. So I was kind of like one of the dangerous guys out there.
Let's say I put you in charge of rehabilitation programs. What kind of program would you structure? What would you offer to them?
It would have to be a self-respect, a program that would have a person be more aware of their self-worth.
I think one of the biggest things for me in prison that helped me out was the fact that when I got a job, I excelled at it. I was able to sustain probably the best jobs in every institution that I was in. So that told me a lot about myself. It helped me to realize that I could be productive in whatever I tried to do. And when I got out, Dave was good enough to give me a job here at Dave's Killer Bread.
How many employees do you have right now?
We have 84.
Of those, about how many are former convicts?
And if you talk about convicts, actual people who've done prison time, we're only talking 1, 2. We have a lot of people who are disadvantaged in smaller ways from jail time, and not having other screw-ups in their past. Actually, I have 3. I might have 4 people now. I don't discriminate based on whether they've been in prison or not. If I get an opportunity to help somebody that's been in prison, I'm down with that totally, because not too many people are willing to do that. And I want to have a mix of people. And I don't want to discriminate against anyone. And I definitely don't, I want to give people in prison a chance, because I want to give other employers basically something to look at and say, hey, these guys can do it.
What's your experience of having a boss that's gone through the prison system himself?
For one, he's came from a place that I've come from, so he's been down that road. We've both had a rough history, and we're both on the road to success. We're both trying to look forward instead of looking back. The work environment here is pretty comfortable, man. It's pretty laid back. We're all about the same age, group of young guys, and basically we all come from hard backgrounds, man. So far, the best experience of my life. Like I said, first job I've had, I've been here for a year and I don't plan on going anywhere.
I'm totally impressed by what he's created here in the 4 years he's been out of prison.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to walk in here and work for him and see what he's done.
Everybody knows that there's ex-cons working here, you know, if that's what you mean.
It's creating problems.
Yeah, it's not a problem. They'd have to get over it if they didn't like it. These are guys that just work hard. They're more concerned with seeing other guys pull their weight. You know, if a guy comes in here with the wrong attitude and doesn't want to do his work, then that's what they don't like.
The thing that really motivated me the most was to see somebody who had been a prisoner, who had gotten out, who had changed his life around, and then came back in. And we had some guys that did that in the 20 years that I was in, because you have to be out of prison 10 years before you can come back into the prison system. And I seen a couple, 3 guys that did that.
If they gave me the opportunity to go in there, I would be into the prison system. I would love to go in and show a video, say, of what I've done. I want to show people just how bad it was for me at one time, and turn it around and turn it into a positive thing. You know, basically, I've taken something very negative and turned it and used it to my advantage. Everybody knows my story. The story is a good thing, so people, they go, okay, the story carries the product. I want to be able to change people's lives by going in and talking to them. I think it's really important that that people need to know that there are alternatives to, you know, that people can get better, that anybody can get better. I don't care what your crime is. I think that just about anybody, you know, can turn their life around. If we just stop giving up on people and start giving them opportunities to change, I think they'll do it.
Dave, really appreciate the tour and the unique insights you've given us into your experience with the penal system. We've really learned a lot, and really appreciate your unique insights into this topic.
My pleasure.
This is Phil Jefferson, bringing you the tools to be sustainable today.
Well, that's a fascinating business. I don't know if you've ever tried his bread, but it's actually good bread too. Not all of us can hire people the way that Dave has, but there are some things that you can do to help create or contribute solutions to this social problem. One is to get a real handle on what crime stats are in your neighborhood. The TV news often sensationalizes this, but find out that that data is available from your local police force, and find out what the stats are for your own neighborhood. It's also useful to get educated on the symptoms of drug use. It might be happening in your own family or with people you know, and seeing that and heading that off and helping them get help can divert them from the criminal system. Engage your police department. If you don't have one, you may want to create a community neighborhood watch program for your neighborhood and invite the police in to come and educate you about what you can do to prevent crime in your own neighborhoods. And pay attention to the bills that are being produced in your legislature and let your representatives know what you think about them.
So those are things that individuals can do. At work, though, be sure that you provide an employee assistance program so people who are encountering problems can get help. And be sure to try to cover mental health and treatment programs, not just the physical health. It's like we seem to think that mental health doesn't matter. Try to employ ex-cons, and apparently you can get tax breaks for doing so. So that's an important thing. You can also volunteer in prisons. You can go in and teach employment skills, reading, those sorts of things would really help the convicts when they come out. And also, since so much of what causes crime is people feeling desperate, like they can't get out of the mess that they're in, to make an effort to work in disadvantaged neighborhoods so that those people can be given hope and have a sense of a future. So James, why don't you tell us a little bit, if people wanted to learn more, what are your favorite resources that they might go to?
If you want to learn a lot about what's going on in the country, then you go to the U.S. Department of Justice website and click on the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and that'll tell you everything you want to know nationally and state by state and by county on probation and jails. Here in Oregon, I'd recommend you go to the Oregon Justice Commission. That's your state agency, and they have detailed information about what's going on in Oregon. And in every county in Oregon is supposed to have a local public safety coordinating committee. And that's organized so that citizens can participate and find out what's going on in their particular counties.
Good.
And also participate in planning for new initiatives.
And don't forget your own booklet, Unlocking America.
Oh, good
Yes,
heavens. Yeah.
yes, please get on my website, JFA Institute, Google on that. The report is in a PDF file. If you want hard copies, send me a letter. I'll send them out to you.
So James, thank you so much for coming up this way and sharing your perspective. I really appreciate it. And your booklet really was an eye-opener for me. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
We're about out of time here tonight. Again, it's been a great ride for Darcy and me. We want to thank you all for having tuned in, and we want to especially tonight thank James for joining us. And also a thank you to our sponsors. If you want to view past shows online, you can go to sustainabletoday.org and watch our videos on demand, and also see the schedule for broadcasts. So thank you.
There's a big, beautiful planet in the sky. It's my home. It's where I live. You and many others live here too. The earth is our home. It's where we live. We can feel the power of the noonday sun, a blazing ball of fire up above, shining light and warmth enough for everyone, a gift to every nation from a star. There's a big, beautiful planet in the sky. It's my home. It's where I live. You and many others live here too. The earth is our home. It's where we live.
Hi, I'm Kelly Danielson. We're here at the Green Renaissance Festival talking to Gordon Westfall about marketing sustainability. Hi Gordon, how are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well.
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're doing here today?
Well, you know, as a nonprofit, we produce a cable television show called Sustainable Today, which is what we're here doing right now, filming for that show. But that's only one thing that we can do to get to the people. What we feel is coming to these kinds of events gives us a one-on-one interaction. We can get up close and personal with people and have dialogue and communication. We can ask questions, we can answer questions, and really get to the heart of what sustainability and self-sufficiency really is. What we do is we bring you the tools to be sustainable today, not tomorrow. And basically we are a 501c3 here in Oregon City, Oregon, Portland metropolitan area. What we really need to start doing is looking at the mindset. We need to start looking at the habits people are doing and what they're eating and how they're functioning in society. So got together with a number of people in the nonprofit, and I came up with the Circle of Sustainable Today. So now that we've got everybody tuned in to sustainability and people want to put in the rain catchment system, and they want to, you know, do permaculture, and they want to figure out how to compost. How do you do all that? It starts with you. What you have to do is plug into your community. You have to have outreach projects. This is a bench that was created in Oregon City. It's a bus stop on a corner that was neglected. We have a chemical-free park. So we've taken it upon ourselves to come in and prevent chemicals from being sprayed in this park.
Well, Gordon, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about the center, and good luck in the future.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm Kelly Danielson, bringing you the tools to be sustainable today.